You have ups and downs in life. There's a lot of people that just stay down. They've never gotten out. They've never gotten up. I don't want to be a could have. I want to be a doer.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casaza, the author of Training with the SEAL. I officially say Training with the SEAL because I am releasing chapters on Substack right now. So if you guys want to, check over and start reading those chapters. Today's guest, I'm really excited to introduce you guys to. He's a retired Special Forces commander with over 3 decades of experience in pushing the limits of human potential. From elite Green Beret missions to coaching the next generation of special operations, he walked the path most feared and lived to teach others how to rise. He is the founder of 18A Fitness, which I'm really excited to explore more. It's a powerhouse program blending mental grit, breathwork, mobility, and strength to create warriors both on the battlefield and in everyday life. He's overcome broken bones, broken limits, and broken excuses. Now he trains others to do the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to introduce you to Kevin Edgerton. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks for having me. Great introduction there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk to you. I said so many amazing things in the bio that I want to really dive deep and explore, but as I was exploring you before being on the show, right, I wanted to start with you at the age of 5 because you mentioned that's where your fitness journey started, right? And right. I want to know, like, what, I guess in a way, like, was there anything that you were chasing or that led to this fitness journey? Because I know for me, I played sports and anything physical though, like I was a soccer player, which is like so physical, and I put myself in goalie because I was like, I don't have to run, So I want to know, like, what made your fitness journey start at 5? How did that work out?
So I don't have any brothers, and so I have cousins that I grew up with my whole life, and the closest one to my age is 6 years older than I am. The oldest one is 12 years older than I am. They all played baseball. And when I was 5, it's like, okay, it's time to play Pee-wee baseball, T-ball. It was the Cubs at the time. I played on the Cubs for a long, long, long time. I was the pitcher, second baseman, played all the positions. But that was the only year that my dad coached any sport. Because he's so competitive that he would, because the kids didn't understand the game or how to play, at 5 years old. Mm-hmm. I was probably the only, one of the few kids that, once you hit the ball, you run to first base. And after first, you go to second to third to home. I didn't need additional pushing or guiding. I knew how to play the sport because, like I said, my cousins, I used to go over there. My Aunt Sharon with all my other cousins, they're all 5 boys too. So it wasn't just like one boy, 5 boys. I would go over there every weekend, watch them play football, watch them run track, watch them whatever sport they were doing. So I always wanted to, follow in their footsteps. But every weekend they had me out either playing wiffle ball out in the front yard, football. My oldest cousin, Bobby, he got a full ride scholarship for soccer. Those 3 sports I played. And then I added wrestling when I was 8 years old.
Wow. Yeah, oh my God.
Baseball at 5, football at 8, wrestling at 8, soccer at 14, because I got cut from baseball my freshman year in high school, which everybody was shocked about.
Wow. Oh my God. Did you go back a sophomore year or did you stick with soccer at that point?
No, I just stuck with soccer. Yeah. Once I got cut, I told baseball, you know what I mean? I was like, F you, you know what I mean? And I walked, like the next day I walked on to the soccer team and started left wing for 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's pretty athletic guy.
Yeah, for sure. So growing up then, obviously you had that competitiveness, I guess, inbred in you, as you mentioned, Your dad was really competitive. You're around your 5 older cousins that are all boys and all males. And you also grew up though in blue collar, right? A blue collar household.
Yes. Yeah.
So what did that teach you? Because, in the bio I mentioned, it's like, we're moving past excuses, right? So what were some lessons that you learned in childhood maybe about grit or excuses or anything like that that helped set the foundation for you going into the military?
So that was my dad was also, besides trying to be a baseball coach, he was in the Marine Corps. He joined when he was 16 in the
Wow.
50s. He joined, did 4 years. When he got out when he was 20 years old, 6 months before Vietnam kicked off. He didn't serve in Vietnam, but he had served, and was always in the household. Somebody that served, so it was always in the back of my mind. Grit. He was a self-employed electrician. So at 5 years old, besides starting baseball, I was also introduced to hard labor. I went because that was the first time he took me on a job to where I had to dig an 18-inch ditch from the house to the garage. Because up in the Midwest, you have to bury your conduit when you go from the house to the garage. And and it took me like 6 or 8 hours that day to dig that 18-inch trench all the way. Yep. So I learned what hard work was, and I had blisters on my hand at 5.
Wow. My dad's an electrician too, actually. Funny.
Yes. Yes.
He would take my brother and my cousin, but then he'd complain. He's like, they're terrible. I can't work with them. But
Yeah, my dad hired so it was me and he hired one of my cousin Rich, one of the 5, and then I would go with him, and then my next door neighbor Butch would go with my dad. You know what I mean? And we would do split ops and stuff like that because I just go get the tools. But the funny thing was Butch always got paid. I never got paid.
Yeah.
But the only thing that would always get me out of work was playing a sport. So I also learned that he would let me actually practice. But then there were some times where if there was a big project, my mom was waiting right there after practice. She'd pick me up and she'd like, your dad needs you. So I'd have to go to work as well right after school or right after practice. So it didn't always get me out of work. But that's how you learn what hard work and grit is. You have your dad having you doing manual labor at 5 years old. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And so did you, like, knowing that like your dad was a Marine, did you know that you were going to go a military route? When did you decide that?
No, I when I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I grew up in Hammond, Indiana. It's known as the region. It's 2.5 blocks away from the south side of Chicago, in between Gary and Chicago. A little bit more diverse than what most people have experienced, a little bit more rougher than what most people experience. At the time, it was great too. You know what I mean? You learn about multiple cultures that a lot of people don't experience until they join the military. Well, I already experienced diverse cultures. After I graduated, again, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. And then there was an incident at home that happened following graduation that was like, okay, well, it's time for me to go. I need to, you know what I mean? I got to get out of here. Went to the Marine Corps recruiter, came back home and told my dad, hey, I'm going to join the Corps. My dad looked at me. He's like, the fuck you are. That was the exact words. The exact words. He's like, you're going to go back. You're going to go, to the other 3 branches and see what they have to offer. Come back and we'll do a course of actions analysis. You know what I mean? Something that you learn later in your military life. The Air Force wouldn't take me because my ASVAB was absolutely dismal at the time because I took the test, in high school. Everybody in high school had to take it, and that's the ASVAB that I used. I didn't never go back and retake it until later. When you go in Special Forces, then your GT has to be a little bit higher than mine was at the beginning. The Navy, I just didn't want to be on a boat. And again, Air Force didn't want me, so it left me down to Army. And when I first enlisted, they gave me 2 jobs. One was a petroleum handler, and one was a engineer. But it's a combat engineer, which was a 12 Bravo, which kind of works out with my dad was an electrician because he was a general contractor as well. He can build anything. And it's like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I became a combat engineer. And joined right before Desert Shield, Desert Storm 2.
So when did you go Special Forces?
So I went to Special Forces. My first selection was in 1995. Did not make it. Was absolutely broke off. I got broke off in 10 days. The doc at the time, everybody knows this old doc. I can't remember his name. My feet were they were like hamburger, right? And I went and seen a doc, and he's like, yeah, he's like, your shit is pretty messed up. And he took x-rays, and he's like, every metatarsal was a grade 4 stress fracture. He's like, you can continue, which I don't think you know what I mean, which I think you couldn't do it, but if you do, you're going to be hard broke for like 18 months. Or I can do a med drop for you right now and you can come back in a year. And I was like, well, what would you do? He's like, I'd med drop and come back in a year. And that's what I did. And so in 96, I went back. I had a pretty good understanding of what it was, because when I went the first time, I was in first cav, a heavy mechanized unit. And being in heavy mech is totally different than being light, where you carry a ruck on your back everywhere. So yeah, it was a good lesson learned, and got selected in 1996.
The first time you went around, was it really because you didn't know what you were getting into? So you didn't know, like, what made you so broken the first time where your body wasn't prepared versus now? I mean, notice the second time.
I had bought a ruck that had the frame built inside of it, and it was more of a mountain outdoor hunting backpack. And I trained with that, and I trained up with like 85 pounds. Well, that thing could hold weight. It distributes weight marvelous, man. And I call that the Cadillac rucksack, right? And then when you go to selection and they give you the Alice pack, I call that the Pinto. That thing is absolutely hideous, right? It rips the shit out of your shoulders, got you pulled back. The kidney pad straps, some of them were there, some of them weren't. And yeah, it was a night and day difference. So when I got back to Fort Hood after the first failure, I went straight to the pawn shop, was like, hey, I want this ruck and two quart canteens of water, and I'll trade you for this. The guy behind the counter was like, sold. You know what I mean? He was like, yeah, no problem, because he knew that that other ruck was worth for like $400. And at the time in 95, that $400 would give that thing probably a lot more than it. That's yeah.
So how did it feel the first time mentally, knowing that you did the med drop, and then like you always had this idea that you were going to go the first time? I mean, a second time around, did you though, with that med drop, did you feel any bit of failure or any bit of concern or any bit of a down that you had to come back from?
Not really coming back from. It was a lot of mental that, to me, you have to be really focused into that mindset that, I'm going to crush this fucking thing. And I mean, when I went back, it wasn't even as remote difficult as it was the first time. You know what I mean? I was really prepared. So again, when I trained up the first time, I was walking on roads, on sidewalks. That month during my train up, when I was training up the second time, I never touched the road. I was always on grass, always on uneven terrain, because at Camp McCall, it's nothing but sand, and that unevenness, your foot is always moving around. And then so while training up, you also learn how to take care of your feet better. You just learn more, because again, I was in first cav. I rode around in the APC. I didn't walk everywhere that I had to go to for work like you do when you're a light infantry. So I just didn't know. It's
interesting because you trained in a way like it was comfortable the first time, and then the second time it was like, no, I got to make this as uncomfortable as humanly possible, because I know what I'm getting into. And now the second time around, did you feel, because you did say that it was still hard, right? It was still a challenge, right? But did you feel any concern? Did you have any rollbacks your second time around? Like, because now it's your second time, it's like, this may be your last shot.
Right. I didn't have any real concerns, because strength wise, I thought I was far superior than most guys during selection.
And by the way, how old were you the first time and the second time?
Like 24 and 25.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we're still relatively young, but strength wise, I was, I think I was stronger than most guys, because I don't know if you ever heard what the Sandman was. It's like 4 poles, and they put these, 2 duffel bags filled with sand in the middle, and you got to carry it as an apparatus, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I could come to here into this position, and I could literally lift the thing up off of my back and get in and out. Most guys were like, you know what I mean, trying to struggle. They were like using a pole to slide in and out. They couldn't get it, and I could just, I would be able to lift it for myself and for my teammates to come get in and out. Strength-wise, I didn't have a problem. Stamina and endurance, thought was a concern, but when you're actually in it, there was one guy that came up, because you do different mileage runs. You don't know what they are. I still, you did like a guesstimate of what the distance were, the unknown runs. There was one captain that came up to me and he's like, it was like the third run. And he's like, I'm going to beat you this time. He's like, always at the end, you come flying past me, because I could just keep a pace, and I would just stick at that pace, regardless if it was whatever the distance was. I can stay at that same pace for long periods of time. So physically wise, I was ready. You know what I mean? And then when you're physically ready, mentally, that helps you a whole lot.
Yeah, I was never physically ready nor mentally. So for yourself, actually, I didn't ask this question, and I am curious,
Okay.
so when you went back to talk to your dad after you went to all the branches and things like that, and you decided to go Army, was he more like relieved? Like what? I realized I didn't go back into that.
Yeah, so he was more relieved. Yeah, because he at the time, you got to remember when he went through the Corps, they beat the shit out of you, like in basic. Like he got, you know what I mean. He got roughed up by his drill sergeants. It was so bad. He told me a story. The pugil sticks. He was like hitting out, and when the drill DI was walking down, he was so pissed off at it. He swung and knocked the DI out. You know what I mean, and ran. Yeah.
Wow.
and hit. Yeah. They could still put their hands on you. He was still, his work concerned about that. He didn't want me to get the brainwash that most Marines get, that you're invisible. And he's like, no, you're visible. You know what I mean? That bullet will still take you out regardless.
Yeah. So do you guys had a close relationship?
Yes. Yeah. He's still alive today, and we still talk probably
so
3 to 4 times a week.
You talked about the and the reason why I'm segueing into this part, because when I was doing my research, you talked about your father's heart attack being a turning point for you.
Right.
And how did that moment reshape your mindset? And how did you use that, I guess, like, the pain of, what you were experiencing as like a catalyst for yourself with change?
He had just quit smoking in December. I was home. It was April, and he's like, hey, I want to start working out. I was like, okay, let's go to the gym. And my cousin, Dennis, one of the 5 boys, he's the youngest. He was a manager at this Omni 24-hour fitness center that was huge, had everything that you need. And so we went over there. We signed up that day. We working out. I was already in the military, and I was lifting a lot. So we did a lift. Then we went and played racquetball, and we're at the racquetball court. And my cousin Dennis was there too, but he had to leave. He had to go do some managerial stuff. And we're going up to the locker room, and my dad grabs my arm, and he's like, hey, go get your cousin. And I was like, okay, you know what I mean? And I took off running, because my dad doesn't usually ask me for help at that time of his life. He was 48. I was 21. I went and got my cousin. I said something's wrong with my dad, and my cousin ran in front of me. He pointed at the front desk. He's like hollered, call 911. My uncle's having a heart attack. We got upstairs and got my dad comfortable, and the ambulance came, took him. He had a triple bypass at the time. We're at the hospital after the bypass, and there was a male nurse. And again, I had a break in service too. You can back that up too. So I had just got out. Desert Storm just ended. I was going to start college, go to Indiana University, and again, I didn't have a clear path of what I wanted to major in either. And he already knew that the electrician stuff was not happening with this guy. He knew my patients were too thin to do electrical or any general contracting stuff. So, there was a male nurse that was taking care of him extensively after the open heart surgery. I talked to him about being a nurse, and he told me all the pros and cons about it. And I was like, oh, that's the next step that I was going to take in my life. And I started going down that path. And, there's one of those things that in college that a young man does. And I messed that up. And we can talk about that if you want to.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you got to take your anatomy, physiology classes. And this is down in Indiana. This is in Bloomington. I took my anatomy class, pass. And it's with the lab, with live cadaver. With, they have the muscles, the bones, always, when you have your tests or the veins, whatever, off of a cadaver. Did well in that. Physiology was easier, but harder because I had to study more for that. Going into the final, I had a B. But I wanted to get an A because I was at that cusp, you know what I mean, from an A to a B. And your GPA is all important when you're trying to apply to a nursing program. I studied like all night long. My class was 8:00 in the morning. It was probably like 3:00 when I was like, okay, I'm done. I got it. I got enough information. I'm going to go to sleep. And I set my alarm clock for 7 p.m. Then the test is at 8. I woke up about 8:20. And again, I don't know if you know how big Indiana University Bloomington campus is, but it is huge. It was like the class is probably 1.5 miles away, and I'm in the dorms. It's either sprint or run, you know what I mean? Try to get there. The bike wasn't going to happen because there was ice on the ground. And then you can't park. You can't take your car and go over there because it's just as bad. It's going to take you just as long as you walk. So I just moped and sat there. Well, about 8:45, the professor calls. And he's like, Mr. Edgerton, and because he knew who I was, because I would go inquire things, if I had a question about, like the Krebs cycle or, something else that was, human performance related, I'd go at, if I didn't know, I would ask, and they would always, because a lot of kids just don't ask. There's 500 people in this class too. The AI knows who I am, and the professor knows who I am. They know that you're giving effort. So he called about 8:45, pretty quickly after the test. And he's like, Mr. Edgerton, were you in class today to take the test? I was like, yeah, what do you mean? You know what I mean? I lied just like that. It was just, you know what I mean? I don't know why I lied, but I did. And I was like, yeah, I was there, and he's like, but he's like, okay, well, we're going to run the Scantrons again, because that's when they would run the Scantrons with the bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah, old school, right? They don't do that anymore. And so I sat there, and he's like, just wait around the room. I'll give you a call back. And I hung up the phone. Not 10 seconds later, he calls back. He's like, Mr. Edgerton. He's like, what color were the tests? I was like, they were white, of course. You know what I mean? The paper's always white. He's like, bean. He's like, all the tests were colored in red and green because I basically gave out holiday gifts for the final. It was only 10 questions, and it was easy. And I was like, motherfucker, right? And so he's like, you know what? For lying to me, Mr. Edgerton, he's like, I'm going to give you a D-. He's like, I'm not going to give you an F, because if I give you an F, you'll come back next semester and you'll be able to FX it. You know what I mean? Your F goes away and your A will be in place. He's like, but if I give you a D-, if you come back and take my class, you get an A, and a D- still averages out to a D, which will not get you into your nursing program. Integrity, one of those life lessons in life that, really hits home, and you learn a lot about yourself at that very moment.
How did that shape you for then your next phase in your career, where you were going?
So college was done. You know what I mean? I was like, I guess I'm going back into the military. Mm-hmm. And at that point, and that was, I was like, okay, when I did get out during my break of service, within like 30 days, I was like, oh shit, it's harder out here. You know what I mean? There's not jobs that pay the equivalent that I was making in the military, even though I was only E4. It was still a lot more money than, me working. I worked at Valvoline doing, oil change filter stuff. And, that was like the time that was like $8 or $9 an hour. And it wasn't even close. And I was like, how in the hell am I even going to pay for rent? How am I going to pay for bills? The money is not there. When your housing is paid for, your food is paid for, your medical is paid for, and then you just get this money that you get to use, and you budget it every month. And if you budget it well, you can actually save money too. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to, you know what I mean? Within 30 days, I realized I was going to join the Army, but the Shield had just ended. And they were doing a mass cutback, I mean, at that time, that's when they were letting go 500,000 people in the military. So it took 3.5 years of me going, every couple of months, or calling the recruiter. I mean, the recruiter probably knew me by first name basis, you know what I mean? Because I would just call and be like, hey, are you guys accepting any prior service? And one day these guys said, yeah. I was like, oh. what can I get? You know what I mean? I was like, sold. And, you know what I mean? I was like, can I go Ranger? You know what I mean? At the time. And he was like, nope, you can't do nothing. He's like, I can get you to Fort Hood and that's it. I was like, damn it. So that's what I did. And then I was like, well, I wanted to go SF too. And he's like, well, once you get there, you're an E4, you can, apply to go.
Wow. What a little journey path. And also the persistence. It was like, and that's what I hope that the listeners take from this, is that the persistence you had just to keep calling and calling and calling until you had that opportunity. And even like, then going like, okay, I was hoping to go Ranger, and they're like, nope, and you're like, you know what, I'm still gonna go. I'm still gonna see what I can get. And
Right.
that takes a lot of persistence. And I just know from myself, who does rejection on a daily basis, that even dealing with it on a daily basis, it's still like my body and mind want to stop, but I have to always restart it up,
Right. Right.
It's like it never gets comfortable for some weird reason, right?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, even to this day, I try to make myself uncomfortable doing stuff.
And I want us to talk about actually like your, I did mention in the intro that, you broke bones and things like that. And I remember reading that you broke your neck and ankle when you were jumping from a plane. You kept going. First of all, tell us about this. Give us a story. And then what does it take to mentally recover from a moment that essentially could have ended everything for you?
So it almost did at the very beginning. I almost didn't. After I got selected in '96, 6 months later, I went to Airborne school. And that's when I broke my ankle on my fourth jump. You're at Airborne school. It's a night jump. I heard when I landed, pop, you know what I mean? I heard it, and it's like, oh, and I'm an E5. I was an E5 at the time, and this E2 private comes up, she's like, I don't feel nothing. I don't think it's broken. I'm cursing this person. I mean, I am cursing this person out like bad. I'm like, this, you know what I mean? I'm like, it's broken. And then like a full bird colonel came over, you need to quiet down. This is an operation. I'm like, this isn't no combat operation. We're at Fort Benning, Georgia. You know what I mean? He's like, well, they said it's not broken. I was like, believe me, it's broken, buddy. You know what I mean? And I didn't call him sir or anything. I was like, it is broken. And so sure enough, when I got to the hospital, it was broke. And so the next morning, we're going to go into some integrity stuff here. I get released. It's probably noon by the time I finally get released. And they'd already the rest of the class had went and did their fifth jump on a Friday. And they're coming back. And like I'm hobbling up on my crutches, and they call my name, and I go up. And they gave me my folder. It's with my certification of completion with 5 jumps. I was like, it was a black hat, said like staff sergeant, blah, blah, blah. I was like, hey, I didn't do this 5th jump. I broke my ankle last night. And he's like, oh, okay. Takes the certificate, rips it. And he's like, go see the S1. And so I went, told the S1 guy the same thing, and he I think he might have ripped up the certificate of completion of Airborne school, and takes a black marker on my jump log and just crosses it out. I was like, you know what I mean? He's like, where are you going next? I was like, well, I'm going to Bragg. I start to become I was going to be an 18 Delta at that time. He's like, well, you could still go up there just as long as you get this within 6 months. You get this last jump in, you can get your Airborne certificate and stuff. I was like, oh, okay. So, I drive with a cast on all the way up to Fort Bragg, sign in to the 18 Delta school house. And at the time, the new barracks had the new compound for the 18 Delta school, which is old as dirt now. Had just been built, like 3 days into it. I'm sitting in my room. I really can't do nothing. I would go to in processing every morning, whatever formation it was. I'd hobble there, and they'd be like, just go back to your room. There's nothing they can do. You know what I mean? I can't do nothing. A Green Beret knocked on the door. He's like, this lady on the 3rd floor, Bryant Hall needs to see you. And I was like, okay. So I went over there and I walked in, and a lady she's like, sit down, Miss Edgerton. I got some news to tell you. And she's like, I got some bad news and I got some worser news. I was like, bad news and worser news? What combo is that? And she's like, what do you want to hear first? I was like, well, what's the worser news? And she's like, well, the worser news is you got to go back to Fort Hood. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, no way. You don't have no idea how hard I tried to get up out of that place. And she said, the worst news is you can't start the Q course. And I was like, well, my ankle's broke. I got that. And she's like, no, like you can't go from there, and there's rules and the regulations. It says if you go from one school to another school, you have to complete the school prior before you can start the other one. I was like, mother. Yep. So I had to go back to Fort Hood. And you talk about going down a rap. You know what I mean? You talk about, man. That was the hardest. That was, you know what I mean? I went down how hard. Soul crushed, spirit crushed. For probably about a good year, because I went back, I got, had a surgery done, had plates and screws installed. And then, I started training, it's like, okay, well, we're going to try to get this thing right. And then you learn that like, oh shit, they put plates and screws, but you can't go back to Airborne school with plates and screws in your ankle. So you got to get that shit removed. So then I had them removed and started training back up again. So that was the second surgery for that ankle. One of those things that you learn to grit and grind. After I got the second surgery done, like we had a family reunion, I remember. And so I drove up from Texas up to Tennessee, and I got, I just, like literally my dad knew that, and I had like a 30-day break, because you get convalescent leave after our surgery, major surgery. I laced up my boots, and then my dad's like, where are you going? I was like, I'm going walking, Dad. I'm getting ready. You know what I mean? I'm going to get ready. He's like, are you kidding me? You just had surgery like 2 days ago. I was like, nope, I'm going walking. He's like, okay. And I went on, like I think it was like a 6-mile walk, came back with no weight at the time, but I had my boots on and iced my ankle. And I would do that every day, and just getting ready to come back to go to the Q course. 3.5 years later, I got to go to the Q.
So talk about that part, because that sounds like it was frustrating, dark. How did you not spiral to like a super dark place that you couldn't come out of? But how did you keep that momentum of walking it all the time and and keeping your eye on where you wanted to go?
Yeah, it was just one of those. When I joined back up, I had like 3 goals that I always wanted to do. The first one was to go SF, the second one was to become an officer, and the third one was to become a PA. And I knocked out 2 out of the 3. And I don't know why I wanted to become an officer. I really, to this end of this day, I still don't know why I wanted it. Just because I thought, that dummy could do it. Why can't I be an officer? It was just one of those things. But yeah, I almost did spiral out of it, into a dark hole. It was a hard one to climb out of. I tell you that. You have ups and downs in life, and if you stay down, and you know what I mean. And where I grew up at, there's a lot of people that just stay down. They don't know how. They've never gotten out. They've never gotten up. They never left the neighborhood. They've never gone and experienced anything. They've never, you know what I mean? And I just didn't want to be one of those people that just like, oh, I could have done that, and that's just not who I was. I don't want to be a could have. I wanted to be a doer.
What about a could have that's listening to the show? Someone that feels like it's stuck or it's too late for them to make a change and transform. What do you have for someone like that?
You got to be consistent and write. So I would write things on my refrigerator. You know what I mean? I put those 3 things on my fridge and on a mirror that I would see. It would just say SFOPA. That was what, you know what I mean? It was just a constant reminder that that's the goal. You know what I mean? And if you don't set goals, I don't know what you do in life if you don't, you know what I mean? And then once you actually set a goal and you achieve it, it's like, now I'm like, okay, I achieved that. Now what's the next goal? You know what I mean? And constant cycle of setting a goal and achieving it. Now it's like, now what do I do now? So I've always done that, but again, that didn't happen. And you know what I mean? Once you become SF, that was like, once you graduate the Q course, that was that was my Super Bowl, right?
When did you do that? How old were you when you did that?
32.
Wow. Oh
31
my God.
or 32. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. I can
Yep.
imagine how that was definitely your Super Bowl. Oh my God.
Right.
What a
Yeah.
moment.
Right. And then once you realize that you can do something that hard and thing else, in my opinion, is like easy peasy after that.
It was like an 8-year journey for you then, right? Because
Oh
you
yeah.
started 24, right?
No,
And then,
in 90, yeah, in 95, and then in 2001, 2002, finished.
this podcast episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Podcast guest Nick McKinley's company, Deliver Fund, brings you guys Thrivers Coffee. It is ethically sourced, it's organic, and it supports traffic survivors. That is right. Thrivers Coffee is all about empowering us to making a difference in the fight to end human trafficking. That's why 100% of the proceeds go directly towards their goal of bringing freedom to victims of human trafficking. So if you guys love coffee that is organic, ethically sourced, and tastes absolutely delicious, and want to help to end the fight of human trafficking, check out Nick McKinley's company, Thrivers Coffee. I set a lot of goals. I have like the small goals, the medium goals, the long goals, and I have like the next round of goals. Like I have them until death, ready and set for me. But the one thing that I struggle with is these long goals in terms of the waiting period of like
Right.
the long it takes, because looking when you hit it, you're like, 8 years, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like that's a long one. And for yourself, like now you're in this fitness, career, you have
Right.
18A fitness, which I do want to talk about for this next part of the show. But like, how do you, I guess, you said consistency, and you kept keeping your eyes on the prize to get there. Is there anything else in terms of um, being in the long game or playing the long game?
You got to have faith. Why would somebody else believe it? You got to believe it,
I
and
love that.
whether that's personal or
Yeah.
spiritual, you know what I mean? Higher, you got to believe it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's segue into 18A fitness,
Okay.
because it's not just a program, because it's
No.
it's, I guess you'd say, like a philosophy, right? You have these mindset principles that you teach, and I want to know how you, because I talked about it in the intro. I talked about how it's like mental grit, you got the breath work, you got mobility, you got the strength, you have the whole entire package. Now, how did you come up with this and go into this direction for yourself?
You remember that last nugget of being a PA, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was getting ready to get out, I was pre-med and I took the MCAT as well. I was going to get out, and I got accepted to multiple PA programs and PT programs because at the time, you know what I mean, I just didn't want to start. In your career, you realize that a PA, all he does is give out medicine and it as the fix. And then you learn, it's like, I don't want to do that. I would rather put my hands on people to fix them. You know what I mean? I'm really good at that. During that time, going back to the Q course the first time, I also got my certification as a personal trainer in 98. This is one of those things, people are like, wow, they would come and start asking me questions about working out because you look like you work out, right? And so it's just one of those things. When I was team leader in Okinawa, we got our first strength coach, one of the Thor 3 guys, and his name is, I hope he doesn't mind, but he's still he's at Fort Bragg still. His name is Mike Hall. And we had a physical therapist. His name was John Hill. And again, I was waffling between PA and PT. And I would always go work out at the gym with Mike because at the time I was a CrossFit insane guy. I was helping running a team that actually won CrossFit Asia at the time. Mike was like, why do you want to go back to school for like 3 years why don't you just get your master's degree in human performance or exercise physiology and be a strength coach? He's like, you're a shoo-in, with your background to become a strength coach somewhere. And so I took his advice. And when I was getting out, I blasted through a master's degree in 18 months. Got my master's degree in health sports science, got my CSCS, and applied for a position at Lackland Air Force Base, where I was the head strength coach for the special warfare Human Performance Squadron. Before that, though, it used to be called the 342nd Training Squadron. 7 years I was there, where I would help. We had students all time, eight hours a day, 40 hours a week. We had students awaiting training to go back into the pipeline, and those were guys that had like failed a course or something, or were going into a higher portion of their course. I got to work them out, not like 8 hours a day. And when I got there, I was like, let me see what you guys got. It was ran by an NCO, and I was going to be like, I'm gonna sit back. When I got hired, I was like, I'm going to sit back and see how things shake out, and I'm not going to implement anything for about, I'm going to give myself a couple days, like a week or two, see how everything goes. And after the second day, I came back and then I was like, we can't do this no more. You guys are killing these kids. I mean, they were absolutely, doing 2 or 3 CrossFit workouts a day, running, rucking, and swimming. You know what I mean? Running every day, swimming like 3 times a day, rucking twice, and then in between like 2 and 3 CrossFit workouts. I was like, this is insane. We're not doing this no more. They're going to run, 3 times a week. You're going to swim. You know what I mean? I sat down with the NCOIC. I was like, this has got. They need rest. Rest is just as important as all that work that you guys are doing. Just because you have them for 8 hours a day doesn't mean that they need to work out for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
So we dumbed that down. Finally, and I got that thing dialed down. It dialed in really well. Over time, you start learning stuff. I got a good friend. His name is John Wolf. He was the Arnott Human Performance Director up in Austin. I don't know if you ever heard of John Wolf before, but great director of human performance. And the way I met him was an SF brethren had passed away during combat. This is in 2015, and so they were doing a memorial workout up on it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go up there and do it, and so I drove up there. John gets up on the platform, and at the time I've done Exos. I was extensively I did that 2-week, it was called API before it turned into Exos. Did their 2-week military mentorship, and then I did my intern at Exos in Cary. So most of their mobility stuff is linear, right? It's back and forth. Everything's forward and back because of a lot of football and stuff. But I'll go to Arnott, and John's Wolf mobility, his warm-up was all rotational and circular. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? I was like, this is different. You know what I mean? I was like, this is what the guys need, because when an operator is playing a field isn't linear all the time. It's
right
everywhere, right? So I went, started doing that. And then I was like, well, I asked John, like, what do you think I need to do? And he's like, oh, you need to go check out this functional anatomy seminar by Andre Sapino, FRC. And I was like, okay. So did that and went and, his circle where you can do controlled articulations, rotations, you do a daily mobility routine, start doing that. And I've been doing that for almost a decade now. And
wow.
Guess what? I don't have no lower back pain or joints that hurt anymore.
Wow.
By doing just a daily 20 minutes. It only takes me like 8 minutes now to do it. But at the time it took me, 20 minutes, but I got it down to, you just move your body in a full range of motion. And, you just start learning those things and you start incorporating that with the students. I don't know if you ever heard about the pararescue NDOC course. It was when I first got there, it's an 11-week pre-dive, basically. And I don't know if you ever know what pre-dive entails for them to go to dive school, but it's one of the hardest courses that the military has.
A couple people have talked about it on the show,
Yeah, pretty hard. But NDOC, they do 11 weeks of pre-dive. And that's all it's doing is getting them ready for dive school. 11 weeks. Army, SF guys, we do it 3 weeks, right? And if you can pass it in 3 weeks, you could go on to Key West, and your chances of succeeding is like 95%. If you do the 3 week and you pass there, it's pretty high once you do a pre-dive. Mm-hmm. But 11 weeks, I was like, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? I was like, you guys are killing these kids, because every week, and again, I didn't have no oversight and no control of this. They took a PT test every Monday. So your central nervous system is shot for the rest of the week. Then guess what? They're doing every day. They're doing a run 5 days a week. they're in the pool twice a day, and then they're working out in between that time. And I'm like, there's no recovery. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's crazy. And so one of the cadre came up to me and he's like, hey, we got these 2 kids, that can't pass the push-ups. And I was like, well, how long have you had them? And like, oh, well, they got recycled. I was like, well, okay. I was like 11. I was like, well, how long have they been with you guys? Like 19 weeks. And you got 2 weeks to get these guys ready to pass their final PT test. And I was like, oh, wow, well, thanks a lot. But you know what I mean? I'm like, I could have had them a lot longer. But you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. There was a luck of the draw and stuff like that, and timing. And one day I was in Chicago for one of those FRC, seminars out. And I remember a friend, his name is Espo. He just retired as well. But he's like, hey, you need to pick up this book called What Doesn't Kill Us by Scott Carney and read it. You know what I mean? It's about breath work. And when I'm reading this, and it's about breath work, but Scott goes over to the Netherlands to debunk Wim Hof's breath work. And I'm reading this though. Right. I mean, he really went over to debunk it, and he says it in the book. Well, Wim had him do this, he's like, okay, I want you to do, like his first test was, I want you to do as many push-ups as you can. Scott gets on the ground and does like 10. Scott was no specimen of human performance, right? And he did 10. Then Wim took him through a breathwork session, and then with a breath hold, do as many push-ups as you can, and he doubled. He went from 10 to 20 after just doing a breathwork session. And I was like, you got to be fucking, you know what I mean? I'm like, no way, right? No way. And this is on a Sunday night that I get back home and I'm reading this stuff. Well, I was on a plane and I'm reading about breath, and I was like, I almost got in the middle of the aisle to test it myself, right? I call over to NDOC. I was like, hey, where's those 2 students at? You know what I mean? We had 7 more days until they had to take their final eval. I was like, I need those 2 students. I need to test this stuff. They're like, they're doing the PT test. I'm like, okay, what the fuck? You know what I mean? I was like, all right. So then I just used my combat controllers that were awaiting training, and I broke it down to them. I was like, hey, you guys know, that first initial go that you do for the 2 minutes of push-ups, what's your stop? What number you stop at, right? They're like, yeah, we know exactly. You know exactly. Mine used to be 50. I would not stop until 50, take my first break. And so I was like, okay, we're going to do that. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to do this breath work and on this breath hold, and then you guys are going to get down and do as many push-ups as you can on the breath hold without continuing. And every one of them did 10 to 12 more than they normally do on a breath hold. And I was like, whoa, you got to be kidding me. And so then I also, besides just on the breath hold, is like, you still got 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Usually they can hold those kids can hold their breath, because they've been in dive school, like 45 seconds. They can hold their breath while moving. I was like, well, then once you stop, just recover, get back in the spot. And then I want you to forcefully, just like you're benching back in the old school, breathe in, go down and out, coming up, going through, and and to finish up to 2 minutes. And like everybody blew their numbers out of the water.
Wow.
Right? So I was like, you got to be kidding me. That afternoon, probably 2:00, I finally got those 2 guys back. Now remember, these kids had already did their PT test earlier that day. They'd already went to a swim session, and now I finally get them. The week prior, I just gave them 10 days worth of workouts. You know what I mean? Like, here's some workouts you can do. And I was like, well, I want to show you guys how to this breath work thing. So again, in the morning, I tested with the controllers and had, awesome results. And now you 2 guys, after you guys are already, your central nervous system's already shot, let's give this a try. I ran them through the breath work. They got down. And earlier, so it was a lieutenant and an airman. So there was like a lieutenant, and he's like a PV2, right? The lieutenant did 66 and the airman did 64 earlier that day. That to pass in they had to do 70.
Okay.
So one's 6 short and one's 4 short of perfect push-ups, because they really judge. Their standards of push-ups are. And so I ran it through the test, and the fucking lieutenant got 74 and the airman got 72 off of doing the breath work. And I was like, those workouts, throw those away. The rest of this week at night, when you get back to your dorms, I want you to practice this. And then come Monday morning, do it. You know what I mean? That's how you do it. While you're standing, they're like, how do I breathe standing in line? I was like, you motherfucker, do it while you're standing in line. You're waiting, right? I was like, do it. You know what I mean? And then when you got to do your breath hold, you just get down and do the breath hold. And they both passed. And then after that, the instructors would come and get me if they had somebody that was on the cusp of passing the push-ups or not.
So that's what you bring. So you bring pretty much all of this into your program: the mobility, right. The breath work, obviously that mental grit of, the everything that you went through those 8 years and before that and all that other right. stuff. And you created this program. Now, is this program for anybody to join at any point? Like, do they have to be in person? Can they do it online? How does it work?
All the 18 Alpha Fitness is all online. It's
all online. Cool.
Yeah, and I have an app is ran through Trainerize. It's one of the app platforms that are out there. All the videos, every movement is shown how to do correctly. If you ever have any questions, once you're a customer, you just ask in the app. I respond really quick. Probably my customer service is pretty top notch because that's my job now. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I'm helping these kids out as much as possible. But
that's incredible. And I love the fact that you're talking about the mobility and stuff like that, especially because it was something that you discovered later on for yourself. Right. So it's not like you have to be a certain age. Just like anybody can participate, anybody can do this, anybody can make a change. And I think that's pretty. And do you do all gender, male and female?
Oh yeah, yeah. I got some females.
You do male and female?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. This is really amazing. I'm going to link this down in the show notes. So if anybody wants to, check out more about your program, know about you further, because that's pretty incredible. Also, I wrote down What Doesn't Kill Us book because that sounds like that would be really interesting.
So in the book, Scott's like, hey, Wim's a great guy. He came up with the technique, but he's like, if you really want to learn the technique, he's like, find Casper. And so I did. Like 2 weeks later, the Air Force paid for me to go to a 3-day breathwork seminar up in Vancouver. And guess who was there? Guess who I told to go up there? Huh? Well, Casper was there, but I'm just saying, guess who I called that was in first group at the time in Washington State?
Who?
Dustin.
Oh, no way. That's
Dustin. And then he had just read the book as well. And he also we had the same thought. We didn't talk about it yet, but he was like, yeah, there's a course up in Vancouver in like 2 weeks. I was like, bro, I'm going. You can come stay with me because the Air Force is paying for it. And so he drove his motorcycle up and we went and did the 3-day breathwork course up in Vancouver with Casper.
That's awesome. Wow, that's interesting. Oh, that's so cool.
And besides that, me and him were on the same Robin Sage team together as captains.
Really?
And we didn't even talk about that. The first time I went to the Q course was to become an 18 Echo. The second time I went back and I became an 18 Alpha. So I got a little experience of getting through special operations selections and Q courses and things.
I mean, you have an incredible story. I mean, you really do on what you went through, the journey that you went through, what you're building now and how you're impacting and creating a legacy for yourself, for the community, for people that are involved within your program. I think that is incredible. And we need more people like you, especially in that health and wellness space, because we need to start moving our body. We need to start, putting that first, instead of the medicine and all that other stuff. Yeah. So since I could talk to you all day, but since it is an hour show, I do have my final question for you. Okay. And that is, what do you have for us listeners that we could do on a daily basis to level up our mental fitness to be able to handle those inevitable challenges that come our way?
So I have a YouTube channel, 18 Alpha Fitness. There's a daily mobility routine in there, and I have also breathwork videos in there. They're a little bit older, but they still work. And then also I have 21 videos. If you search in YouTube, One's Ready, that's spelled out One's Ready, and 18 Alpha Fitness. I got a good friend of mine. He was special reconnaissance at Lackland. We're really good friends. They have their own podcasts, and he comes over and I get to torture him doing mobility because he's absolutely horrible at doing mobility work.
I think mobility is so important, and we just don't think about it. We don't do it. We're sitting all the time. I definitely think that it is what also helps you with, just being prepared for life out there, or whatever is going to come. Your body needs to be mobile. I mean, it's just common sense, right?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to check that out. I'm definitely going to link your YouTube too in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You are fantastic.
I appreciate it, Gina.
Thank you. And everyone that's listening, like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member, and get those extra goodies that only our Substack members get. And I will see you guys all next week. Thank you.